Isaac,
Mm-hmm.
we're live. Awesome. Welcome to the pod.
Alrighty, excellent.
Yeah. So, what were we just talking about? You were talking about how gardening is kind of like a mental health outlet for you.
Yeah, gardening it's a lifelong activity. I started when I was a young kid. I didn't really enjoy it as much. I did a lot of weeding in my parents' garden, and probably I think the first thing I ever grew were Egyptian walking onions, and it's some of my favorite childhood memories because I would plant them in heavy clay, and they would do horribly, but they would survive, and um, yeah, it's a probably one of the things that started my love of allium plants. Um,
We're allium plants.
Alliums are anything in the onion garlic family, so it's leeks, ramps, and then I guess I collect them. I collect different species of them and grow them in my garden, and I eat them. They're they have lots of sulfur compounds that are good for the body. Um, I don't know. Gardening, it's in farming. I expanded my gardening into farming, working for market farmers, probably starting around 2008.
What's the difference between gardening and farming? Gardening's for yourself. Farming is like you're making it a product, or how are you different? What is the definition of each of
I
them?
would say a farmer is producing food for their community
Mm.
or for sale, um, where as a gardener, I guess I am, in some respects, I'm a seed gardener or a seed farmer, where I garden. A lot of what I enjoy doing is growing plants, saving their seed, and then sharing that seed with friends and people in the community. And it gives me a connection with the web of life on the planet. It's a very tangible way of engaging other creatures. I mean, every seed planted it's got the potential to become a new life and make more seeds, and they're all going to be unique. And so there are just so many amazing things about gardening. I could just ramble on about it all day.
That's kind of the point. Yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting. So, all informal education, just like as you grew up, you learned more about like plants and whatnot. Like,
Well, so I would say I was inspired to really learn about plants probably around the age 16 when I had a very basic and not a very basic idea of what my great grandfather Frank Coblentz did as a pharmacist. In my mind, I thought he was an herbalist and was like dispensing herbs to people. Um, in my more mature understanding of what he was doing, it's a lot different than that. But that inspired me to learn about plants, to learn about herbs, how they can be used as medicine, how they can be used as food. Um, and I would say the interest it would go in cycles. Like I would read books about herbs and then get distracted and do something else for a few years, I would always come back around to it. And and eventually I discovered permaculture. I guess probably around 2008. The idea of oh, like agriculture or growing food as an extension of I don't know your everyday life or being there's I don't know permaculture is a big tent
yeah.
but for me it's what most interests me about permaculture or techniques of gardening are ecosystem repair and restoration. I mean, we humans have done a lot of damage to the ecosystems on the planet, and it's there. In my own experience, gardening, I know how resilient and um, plants are, and how soils can be rebuilt and revitalized. But it's kind of like it's a dance and a collaboration between me and the plants and the seeds and the soil. We all kind of work together and play different roles. But for the most part, I try to just kind of let it happen. I observe, when are the plants making seeds? When are they ripening? When the seeds are ripe, to me that says that's a good time to, if they're something that can overwinter, that's a good time to plant seeds or biennials, especially for next year. Things like that, just observing and there's so much we can learn by observing the web of life. Yeah.
Yeah, so the permaculture thing, like that also kind of makes sense with it's like sustainable, right? Forever, which is kind of like the getting the seeds. So then, I mean, yeah, like, man, that's really exciting. So you're just making mistakes and learning from that and then doing the same, changing that next year.
Oh, yeah. And anybody who has gardened or farmed for any kind of period of time knows that every year is different. It's never, you're always presented with new challenges, and last year was very dry. This year we've had a lot more water. And so it's like a dance. You have to kind of adjust to what nature provides. But you can also, you can do things like water and whatnot. But I think a lot of the gardening that I do try to do it with minimal inputs, primarily focusing on compost and building the soil food web. I do use like Revita organic fertilizer on some of my. I think it's a chicken manure based fertilizer, and I use that on some of my vegetables in my garden.
Cool.
But for the most part, I try to rely on building the soil with composted plants.
Yeah. So then, like, what are the so, like, a dry year last year versus a really wet year this year? Like, what inputs or what variables change with a bunch of rain and like all summer? So, like, what should somebody kind of like look out for now with all this rain?
Well, I've had experience. Root rot is one of the things I've had. But again, like, I'm really speak more as a gardener than a farmer because I've worked on many farms, but I've never been the farmer doing all the planting. But yeah, I guess for I plant a lot in hugelkultur or mound beds because of most of my experience has been growing plants in heavy clay soils, and one of the best ways of making those work for a wider variety of plants is to mound it up where there will be better drainage because heavy clay soils hold a lot of moisture, and that is what can lead to root rot. But if you're able to build a soil structure that is more free draining, then it can expand the kind of plants that you can grow.
Yeah, I put some corn in the ground, corn and green beans, like, and then it like not in a mound or anything, just kind of like normal rows, and it didn't take off, it root rotted, but we had put some zucchini, kind of like you're talking about, in mounds, and those were fine.
Yeah.
And so then I tried to redo the corn kind of like with some raised rows, but hopefully that works. Yeah.
And it's hard. You can. I also, if it didn't work, I'll try planting again. Like. Yeah. I think we are at a phase in the year where you could probably try again, and
it's not too late yet. You're saying, yeah?
Yeah, no, not too late. And you can plant beans. It's gonna be, they do take a while, but it's. I think that's one of the things I love too about gardening and farming is the endless experimentation, and. I guess the possibility for new discoveries or some interesting crossbreeding between species, it's a kind of an endless palette of textures and new new flowers to bring delight.
Yeah, you do post like very consistent and very beautiful flowers all the time. I do appreciate that.
Yeah, it's A lot of it I do for my mom,
Nice.
because she's a lifelong gardener and is no longer able to garden.
Mm.
But it's a big part of where I learned to garden was from my parents, and it's also a way I honor them is by gardening, because I don't know, it's been an important part of our family.
Yeah, that was another thing that struck me. It's like I don't know shit about my lineage, like on either direction, mom or dad's side. And I think a couple different times you've posted like about going back more than a couple generations. Like, has that always been something that was like important? Do you think that's just a cultural, like a generational difference? Like, I'm a young guy, we don't care. Maybe that's generalization.
I think it's probably my family, or just I think and certain individuals. I don't know. I would describe my parents like we're all kind of black sheep, probably all neurodivergent, but none of us had any kind of diagnosis for that. But I would say, what was I talking about?
I would just like how well in tune you are to your lineage, and like knowing about them and their stories, and like kind of keeping their, I mean, even remembering them, so like how that's maybe different than.
It's generational. Yeah. My father inherited a lot of genealogy that had already been done by members of his family, and it was and so he and my mom, it kind of became a hobby of theirs that they worked on for probably decades. It was something that they spent time doing together, and so when my father passed, I inherited a really solid. I mean, I know all my great-great-grandfathers and grandmothers. And probably all the way up to my third great grandfathers and grandmothers. I don't have all their birth dates, but it is, I guess, a privilege, in a lot of ways. Part of it, I think, is I don't know why it was important, or why they remembered. And I come from a long line of colonizers and enslavers, and mostly white people that did things that I'm not very proud of. But it's what a lot of us carry that heritage, and I guess making better choices is how I deal with that.
Yeah, I mean, and you kind of already pointed that out before. You said like when you were 16, you learned about your grandpa or great-grandpa being a pharmacist. So then were you just kind of like, that's fucked up? Like when you learned that it wasn't everything you thought it was?
Well, I guess I learned a lot about, most of what I've learned about what pharmacy was like in that era has been in the past 2 years since I started working at the Cannabis Museum here in town. We have an amazing collection of old pharmacy journals, books.
At the Cannabis Museum?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
And all kinds of different artifacts related to Victorian area pharmacy. And so that sort of provided a focus for me to do a lot of research and learn about what my great-grandfather was dispensing. And for the most part, he was learning formulas and learning how to mix herbs, minerals, but I don't know. I don't think it was really his calling. It's I don't really have the time to get into all the stories and the details. But he was I feel like my great-grandfather Frank was his father Isaac, who I'm named after.
Oh, cool.
And Isaac's brother John Philip. They had a patent medicine that they called the Hindu Pain Conqueror, and it was they were not Hindu, they were German immigrants, and they were capitalizing, they were culturally appropriating the mystique of Asian cultures. And it was an opium-based liniment that people were drinking, and it had chloroform, ether, opium, horse mint, which is Monarda, cedar oil, and a lot of other plant-based oils.
Interesting.
Yeah, and so I think they made a lot of money off of that, which my great-grandfather's generation, I think, spent all of the money. But And I think Frank was probably able, to some degree, able to kind of live like I think he was kind of a trust fund kid to some degree because he was able to live off of the money that the previous generation had accumulated. And so I think my relatives did have they had a kind of easy life during the Gilded Age, during when a lot of people were suffering.
Yeah. Interesting. See, just even like that, these things. That's really awesome. And that's cool that it was kind of archived before and passed along too. That is pretty cool too. But the Cannabis Museum now, that's fun to talk about. How did you even like get involved in that? What do you do for the Cannabis Museum?
I was brought in one of the main reasons is my experience with plant fibers. For several years I've taught classes on working with plant fibers like Indian hemp. Apocyinum cannabinum is the Latin name for it. Yucca fibers, stinging nettle fibers, milkweed fibers, all kinds of different plant fibers that native indigenous people used in this country. And nettles were more of a European fiber used in Europe as well. And so that's how I got the job at the museum, was my experience with plant fibers. And also they hired me to work with the database to do basically like collections management. And so I work with the collections and the database.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really.
Did you just do a class too on like some fiber thing, or not a class? Or like there was something out at the Cannabis Museum like a couple weeks ago.
So one of my passions is something called the fiber shed movement.
Yeah. Okay.
And it is. We had our first meeting for the Southeast Ohio Fiber Shed at the Cannabis Museum on June 8th, and it was basically a meeting to kind of introduce local folks to the concept of the fiber shed, which is our long-term goal is to build a local fiber economy based on working with protein and plant fibers. So that would be wool, alpaca.
Oh, that's what you mean by proteins.
Yeah,
Animal.
protein,
Yeah, okay,
so animal
okay,
protein
okay.
fibers. And then plant fibers from flax and hemp, and any other plant fibers that might be conducive. And a lot of these industries have all been out, shipped to other countries, and we don't have, for the most part, any solid supply chain or the infrastructure to do a lot of these
Means of
things.
production.
Means of production. So a lot of it has to be built from the ground up, but we're also in an era where we have, we can build smaller, more regional facilities. And I think we're moving into an era where it just doesn't make sense to ship things all over the globe, and doing things more locally, like processing fiber, makes a lot of sense. The economics of it all, we're not there yet.
Yeah. Well, so how was the turnout on the 8th? How did that go?
The meeting was wonderful.
Great.
I would say we probably had about 35 people show up. We had goats. We had Pygora pygmy goats in the gallery of the museum, which was fabulous and delightful. And we are going to be having another. We're planning on when we're going to have our next gathering.
Yeah, cool.
So the fiber shed, it's for fiber artists, for people who produce fiber, for farmers who want to grow flax, or for artists who want to grow flax, play with flax, experiment, work with natural dyes. All of these activities fall under the umbrella of the fiber shed. And so it's a really big tent that I would say anybody that wears clothes has a vested interest in the fiber shed. So
Nice.
Something I'm very passionate about, and one of the things that has inspired me is working with a group in Cleveland called the Rust Belt Fiber Shed. That was my initiation into the movement.
Cool.
And last year I grew a flax crop, and it was part of my learning and of working with bast fibers at the Cannabis Museum, because flax and hemp are both processed with similar tools and similar prep processes like retting, where you're basically fermenting the stalks to kind of break down and loosen up the glues that bind the fibers together on the stalk. And I primarily use a technique called water retting, where I submerge the fibers under the water for a matter of days, and microorganisms break down the pectins and lignins and everything that's holding stuff together. And then after retting, you dry it down, and then you break. You use something called a break, which cracks the inner stem or the hurd of the hemp or the flax stalk, and then you kind of scrape that away with another tool called a scutching knife. And then after you scutch the fibers, then you use a comb. Looks like a medieval torture device.
Yeah, I saw them at the Cannabis Museum.
Yeah, those are called hackles.
Wow.
And those are sort of the final processing for the fiber. And all the tools I just described are the pre-industrial tools that were used for processing flax and hemp. There's modern equipment that does it on a much larger scale. That's similar but different.
Is that what your hope would be? Like, so when you say like these small regional centers that, could pop up, and like, would you want to use like a modern technique, or is it like, would you be priced out of it? Like,
it would definitely having a regional bast fiber processing center where you could process hemp, flax, maybe canaf, but there are different aspects of the supply chain, like processing and then spinning. So it would take different pieces of that supply chain. But it's also, transportation is a big factor, I think, in shipping the fibers is a big expense in all of it.
From like where they grew to the first processing plant, then from there to the next place, and
exactly.
Once it's
So there's a lot of things that need to be worked out. But at this point, it is a lot of more doing it by hand, doing it at an artist scale or a farm or garden scale, as a means of learning the techniques, learning. It's also a way of engaging the ancestors, because every single one of us has an ancestor that worked with fibers. They were either spinning flax, working with hemp, working with cotton, working with nettle fiber. Might be a lot further back for some of us, but all of our ancestors were fiber artists.
Yeah, that's interesting. That is pretty cool. So the place up in Cleveland, like, so you're saying like there's just kind of these random fiber shed people that have like these groups, or like when you say like the fiber shed movement?
Well,
like,
the fiber shed movement, I believe it started in Southern California, somewhere in California. It might have even been Northern California, and that branched out all over the world. And it's based on, well, part of it too, a big component of it is educating the public on the destructive nature of fast fashion, and the disposable nature of our society. How we have a throwaway society where we're just disposing of. We buy things and just throw them away, and the majority of our clothing is not compostable. The majority of it is creating or contributing to the epidemic of microplastics.
Is that why it's not compostable? Is it the dyes? Is it the like material, the actual material the clothing's made out of? What makes it not compostable?
Because a large majority of our clothes are made with synthetic fibers or blended with synthetic fibers. Fibers like cotton, flax, and hemp are all compostable. But so when you take something like wool and you make superwash wool, that does interfere with its ability to be composted. Because superwash wool is you're basically coating the wool fiber with a plastic coating, and so then it basically makes that non-compostable. So that's another aspect of the fiber shed is to educate the public on what our clothes are made of, the qualities that they have, and why we should care about that. And the and there, it's fast fashion is such a huge topic that I encourage everybody to look into it because it's important. And the fiber shed movement is a response to that on trying to create bioregional nodes where we start producing our clothing more regionally, like our ancestors did. And it is, it's a big dream, but I'm a big dreamer. So.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's such a great aim. So, thought experiment. Like, if you just had a wand to like wave, is it just money? Is just money in your way? What needs to go right for this movement to progress the way that you would want it to, in the best way possible?
Well, it's probably too complex to just.
Yeah.
A lot of it's attitudes about. An aspect of clothing that is compostable or not, sometimes it's you need to hand wash it or wash it with cold water. You can't just throw it into the modern washing machine and dryer and walk. They have more complex care regimes, so that
it's like a barrier. It's like I don't want to deal with that. I just want to throw it in the water.
Exactly. So there are barriers that are very real. So part of it is changing the culture to appreciate garments that are that will rot. That there is value in that. So, and money is a big thing, but it's also with regards to hemp, we're very hobbled by legislation, by the regulatory structures that are just make it impossible for a farmer to grow a hemp crop and have any kind of hope that they're going to make a profit. The permitting process is cost prohibitive at this point.
Like the tier 1, 2, 3 licenses is what you're talking about?
Yeah, they're just. There are ways. There are ways that larger farmers can work within the system, but for small farms, and for anybody who wants to do experimental work with these fibers, it's cost prohibitive. But it's, we just have to keep working at it.
Pushing the knowledge, yeah. Keeping the conversation going. I'm learning a whole bunch right now.
Yeah. And flax is also a possible another fiber that it's what linen cloth is made of, and it was a big part of what our ancestors were growing. Cotton really, I think a lot of cotton kind of took over, and a lot of it was economic. A lot of the advent of synthetic fibers also has a huge impact on where we are today with clothing and fiber production. And it's an industry that we have almost completely outsourced or abandoned in this country. There are a handful of mills that still process sheep's wool.
Nice.
And there are small ones popping up. So there are things happening, and the fiber shed movement has inspired I would say a resurgence in artists, in fiber artists being interested in working with these materials
Yeah.
and learning how to grow them and process them, and as well as take it to the next level where it's actually on an industrial, more of a larger scale.
Yeah, that's cool. So do you do like small scale? Like, what was that? I was looking at your profile and like you have got like the spindle thing. Like you're like spinning some like what is that thing?
That's called a drop spindle, and
Nice.
it's one of the earliest. It was the precursor to the spinning wheel, and it's used for spinning flax, wool, any kind of fiber. There are similar tools for spinning cotton that have a somewhat different configuration because when you're spinning cotton, you want a much faster or more twist. So each fiber has nuances, but that was a drop spindle.
That's pretty cool. And like, where are you getting the fiber for that? Or like, yeah.
So the flax fiber I grew.
Oh, nice.
A hemp farmer named Isaac Wigman donated a hemp crop in 2023 to the Cannabis Museum, and that was the first time I was ever really able to play with fiber hemp.
Cool.
But I also get Lisa Hines, who founded the Southeast Ohio Fiber Shed here locally.
Cool.
She's done some projects with organizing local farmers with sheep to produce yarn from sheep raised in Washington County. She worked with one farmer specifically,
Nice.
and has had yarn produced from these Jacob sheep, and so that's another place. There are a lot of farmers that produce really nice wool locally, and unfortunately, because of the insane economics of our world, there's not a lot of value in wool currently, and it's costs farmers more money to do anything with it than to just compost it or.
Like the only difference, it's like we just have to decide that it's valuable, right? Like, what is the difference between it not being in it? You know, like, that's just weird.
It's so.
It's just, are we too stimulated? You know, like.
I mean, and part of it is that we outsourced our manufacturing capacity to places that had cheaper labor. And that also, to a lot of degree, outsourced the production of those commodities to, make it, because it's, shipping things like wool and fiber, it's not very cost effective.
Yeah.
Raw materials like that. It's a kind of, there's so many reasons it doesn't, it all doesn't make sense, but, yeah. What were we talking about again? Back to.
This is great. We were talking a lot about the fiber shed. I think the Cannabis Museum was how we got there. This is like how you got introduced to the Cannabis Museum, which.
Yes.
But I mean, I would love to hear more about that. Like, so the grow class. Like, what are some other things that are happening out at the Cannabis Museum?
So we have a monthly grow class at the museum with a panel of. We almost always have at least 4 very experienced growers who have a wide range of experience, indoors, outdoors, that can answer all kinds of questions. We also have tiny museum concerts at the museum, usually once or twice a month. Usually, I think we've shifted to Saturday evenings for those. We occasionally have festivals like our spring hemp fair, and we are open Wednesday through Saturday, noon to 5, and generally it's our current exhibit is called Cannabis Americana, and it's exploring the early history of cannabis as medicine in the United States, and there's also a portion of the exhibit that explores the early history of fiber hemp, cannabis sativa, which is fiber hemp, and a little bit of how how we got here, leading up to Prohibition. And the prohibition of cannabis was largely an economic hit job.
Because of the cotton, right?
Because of cotton,
Yeah.
because of the synthetic fibers.
I didn't realize the synthetic fibers were at the same time as
They
cotton.
were all
Yeah.
they were all kind of coming up, and there was also William Randolph Hearst had a media empire based on his paper. He was making paper with with his wood pulp industry, and that was also threatened by new technology in the creation of hemp paper, which would have been a competing commodity.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot of different industrial interests
Against hemp.
against that were interested in sidelining
Yeah.
hemp, and it really had nothing to do with the medicinal properties. That was more of a way of kind of using racism as a way of demonizing cannabis, and that the changing the from cannabis or hemp to calling it marijuana.
Which was just a derogatory, slanderous title, right?
I don't know if it was derogatory. Well, it was. I mean, the way it was being used it was being used as a way of demonizing Mexicans, of stereotyping, and yeah. So I think there was also cannabis is not easy to maybe turn into a pharmaceutical drug like other, and that was another reason that I think it could be sidelined, because it didn't have, they couldn't really, opium had, the analgesic properties were much more, they couldn't really just say, no, we can't do it, or sideline, they controlled it. They definitely made it a controlled substance, but they didn't outlaw and say it was a useless plant that had no value, which they did with cannabis, which is a big old lie. We all know. That's yeah.
Yeah. Have you kept up with any of the Senate Bill 56, House Bill 150? Have you kept up with any of this stuff?
I do.
The vote's tomorrow, right? Like, they put it back in. I follow a couple Instagram profiles that are very great about continually updating, and a lot of them came out of the Cannabis Museum people. But
yeah, Grassroots Ohio is
Yeah,
our
yeah.
local activist group. I should be more. I should be more up on all of
no,
this.
I mean, you don't have to get
but-
into specific. I've had a couple of people just. I guess what is the thing is that they are continue. So we voted on issue 2, right? And effectively, House bill and Senate bill each have kind of a bill that they're trying to propose changes to what we voted on.
Correct.
Yeah, and the House bill and the Senate say one's coming from one side and one's kind of coming from the other. Is what I understood.
Honestly, I can't speak it with
Yeah.
about it with any kind of authority.
That's okay.
I do know they're trying to change the laws on
That we voted on.
Well, that we voted on, and part of what they're trying to do is recriminalize cannabis, which is, it's crazy. I think they're upset that they've lost a stream of income from criminalizing cannabis users.
Yeah.
But it's
What is your? I mean, have you always been in Athens?
I grew up in Northeast Ohio.
Oh, okay.
So I'm from Ashtabula, Ohio.
Yeah, I think I've driven through it before.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Bob Dylan mentioned it in a song. It's on Route 90.
nice.
And the native people, it was River of Many Fish, was its original meaning. But my mom and dad went to Athens as students during the 60s. And they both my dad got a degree in art history, and my mom was more majored in beer drinking. And she got her degree in art
Nice.
many years later. So my sister also went to OU and got a degree in art, photography. And so I ended up, I moved down here and ended up getting a degree in art, degree in sculpture. That's kind of how I ended up in Athens, and this was 1999 was when I started going to school here.
Cool.
And yeah, I don't know. I've been in and out of Athens ever since.
Well, so I guess the purpose of asking, so then like just even comparing those two different spots, like what was like how has the public perception of cannabis changed over time? Like, what was there always a group of people that always thought it wasn't a big deal, or like even back then, like I don't know, yeah, just like what is it? What has the perception changed?
Well, in my own lifetime, cannabis has always been demonized, but I also, since I was a teenager, also gravitated toward the fringe, and the people that I associated with loved cannabis. Okay. So, I've been on the fringe most of my life. Just, I don't know. I've always kind of, I don't know, been myself.
Yeah, fuck it. Regardless, yeah, I don't care what you think. Yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, after college, I got this degree in sculpture and had no idea what I was going to do with myself. And that was sort of how I got into farming and gardening. I got a job with friends working for their landscaping business. And eventually they morphed into more of a market farmer. And so I helped out on doing market farm kind of stuff, and yeah, that really kind of got me into being a farm hand. I think in 2008 I just needed to get away, and I moved to Oregon for a few years, spent some time in Eugene, Oregon. Then I came back, and around 2016, my dad was diagnosed with lung cancer. And so I moved up north home to Ashtabula, and he died pretty quickly after the diagnosis. And so I ended up staying in Ashtabula with my mom for a few years and transitioned through, liquidating their estate and selling the house and all of that. And finally, when that was all resolved and done, this job opportunity at the Cannabis Museum came up, and I took it. And I'm back down here in Athens, and I love it.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So you said you said you were really passionate and loved the fiber shed movement. Like, what else? What else do you love? What do you?
Well, art. I guess I'm an art. Creativity. And to a large degree, I shifted my my creating objects and art into creating beautiful flower beds. So I just see gardening and building beds as an extension of art. It's like you're sculpting with the earth and the soil and the seeds. It's and I think one thing I discovered in being an artist, and nature always does it better. There's just no getting around that when it comes to beauty. And so as an artist, I've learned to be more collaborate with the web of life than trying to be the director of, and, just sort of, seeing where, maybe shape things a little bit, but also let things happen. And again, it goes to that idea of it being a dance, that it's never, I don't know, it's always just kind of this, and it's not a set dance that you know all the steps to. It's more of a jazzy, improvised kind of thing.
What is it, like? How do you define art? What does it mean to you to be an artist?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Going to art school was an interesting experience. It kind of made me not want to make art for several years, just because it's just sort of like so much of art school is just kind of they're trying to justify why art school exists. And just
Oh gosh.
beyond the fact that it's, that it brings joy to create, I think that would have been a good enough baseline. But I was attracted to art because I love making things and I love process. But I guess to me, art is making things for your community, making things that inspire your community, or the people around you. That's really, I don't know. That's where for me, that's what art is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of apple doesn't fall far from the tree, right? Both your parents art majors.
Yeah.
Sister as well, photography.
Yeah.
That's cool.
She's She's an art therapist in early childhood. Special education specialist. I mean, she's, yeah, 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 we do. My parents were both social workers, and it was something I kind of swore I'd never get into, and I'm very into social work, but just seeing them struggle with the nonprofit sector my whole life. My dad, for 30 years, he directed the Head Start program in Ashtabula County. And for probably around 20, 25 years, my mom directed the domestic violence shelter.
Oh, wow.
And so they both were very, very deep in the nonprofit world. And so, yeah, I guess they laid, they planted good seeds.
Yeah.
So,
What's a hard lesson you've had to learn?
A hard lesson. Well, I mean, I've learned lots of hard lessons. Drinking alcohol is really bad for for me personally is one hard lesson I had to learn. I quit drinking alcohol in I think February of 2023, and it was for years. Impaired my function.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think part of that too is I mentioned earlier, I consider myself neurodivergent. I never had a diagnosis of ADHD or anything particular, but I don't know. I would say alcohol kind of helped me socialize with humans, and it I don't know. It was a good thing and a bad thing, but in the end, it was poison.
Yeah, I've heard that.
But yeah, I don't know. Hard lessons.
Or what about the clutch pedal pivot? What is your advice? It's like I talk to a lot of people that are like, oh man, I would love to start gardening, or like what's your advice to somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, maybe doesn't have a huge space? Like, are there a couple plants to start with that would like help you kind of gain some confidence that you can do something? Is it just putting some herbs up in a window? Is it a couple tomatoes? Like, what's your advice to somebody who wants to start gardening for themselves?
Oh, never give up.
Never give up. Cool.
Maybe start with something like a walking onion or something that's easy. But a practice that I do is every year I might focus on a new plant family. Like this year I'm focusing on the mallow family, the hollyhocks, the common mallow, some other pretty garden mallows and decorative mallows. Lots of okra. I'm growing some kanaf, some Korean silk plant. These are all plants in the mallow family. I'm going off on a tangent. Sorry. But to make it easy, starting seeds is challenging and hard, but again, never give up. And maybe try direct seeding. Try things that are appealing to you, that work.
That kind of lines up with what you said. Like, direct it a little bit, but let it happen. Like, kind of find something that you're interested in a little bit, and like maybe just follow that. Like, it's in line with what you said earlier.
And that's what nature knows what to do. And if you kind of help make the conditions ideal, it'll happen. And part of it's, I love learning, and I have an insatiable appetite to learn new things. So I guess that's part of, like, I've done a deep dive into soil science, into plants, into growing things from seed, growing things from cuttings, all of these things. But I did it over time. So I guess if you want to learn to be a gardener, forgive yourself, give yourself time. And there's always next year.
Yeah.
And next year's going to be different. Every year is going to be different. It's not going to be the same. That's some advice I have for gardening.
Awesome.
Anything else?
I mean, no. This is great, Isaac. I appreciate you coming in.
Yeah.
So you don't know when the next Fiber Shed meeting, but you mentioned like an organization. Do they have like a Facebook or any type of social media? The Fiber Shed Southeast Ohio.
So the Southeast Ohio Fiber Shed we have an Instagram page and a Facebook page that that's where we're going to be announcing our next meeting.
Yeah. Cool.
And a lot of it is word of mouth.
Yeah.
But yeah, we should have that information soon, hopefully within a week or two.
Yeah. So check that out when it's open. Check out the Cannabis Museum Wednesday to Saturday, 12 to 5.
And I am Copper Weaver on Instagram if you wanted to check out.
Yeah, I'll put that up in the description. Awesome.
Yeah.
Isaac, thanks for your time today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah.